Hi, I'm John Atack. This is
Sam Atack.
Yeah, remember him. And this is
Edwin Stratton.
Edwin Stratton. I have summoned you from the darkness of your room for a conversation about something that you know far too much about, which is...
I've forgotten it all.
I know. And that's a good thing, that you've forgotten more than I'll ever remember about this. And that topic is the Holocaust, the Shoah. And for me, the thing was, I was talking to some friends a couple of years ago, and one of them said, I didn't think... In fact, I can go way back. I knew a guy who he's driving me up to London to give a talk, and he, many years ago, and he said he didn't believe the Holocaust had happened. And we talked for, it was like 2.5 hours there and back. And at the end of it, he said, yeah, okay, it happened. I just don't think it was 6 million people. So I said, what could we settle on? What would make you know? And he went, well, maybe 2 million. And I said, that's probably bad enough, isn't it? So, and about 2 weeks later, I had a party, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, down in my kitchen, I found this guy explaining that the Holocaust didn't happen to somebody. And it was a jolt to my reality that we'd spent hours going over it, and he'd gone, yeah, sounds like it probably did happen, you know. So, and since then, I've had a couple of friends who came up with this idea, which I can't make any sense of. So I went off and I read Denying the Holocaust, Michael Shermer, which I thought was sorry. What am I talking about? Denying History. Yeah. I have a little copy of it right here, by Michael Shermer and Alex Grobman, and it's not really a book that I would recommend to somebody who's trying to persuade somebody that the Holocaust existed. It's very useful for somebody who wants to understand Holocaust denial, because the first third of the book is about what history means. And I found that incredibly useful, but it wasn't what I'd gone to the book for. And they're talking basically, long story short, they're saying there is such a thing as scientific history, where you do check things. And the thing I found in researching the life of Ron Hubbard and stuff about that is a context develops, that there are pieces of information that fit together so closely and so tightly that, you know, so one of the reasons that the Holocaust deniers will say, well, there are disagreements among witnesses about how long it took people to die, you know, when they were given carbon monoxide poisoning in the vans or what have you. And this guy says it was 2 minutes, and this guy says it's 11 minutes. And you're going, yeah, but they're saying they witnessed it. You see, that's the bit that's important to me. Whether they got their watch going, and how long it takes to kill a human being.
And how large the rooms are.
And what concentration the gas is at, for whatever reason. But anyway, that's my preludium to it, that this idea that it really startles me, that you can dig out evidence. So, you know, in this case, I had testimony from Rudolf Höss, the first commandant of Auschwitz, saying that he was asked if had actually killed 1.25 million Jews, and he didn't. You know, so that's not in fact true, but he killed a lot. And you know, just how can you think of such numbers? You know, but when he was asked, so you executed 1.25 million people, his response was executed and exterminated. Now, there's no reason why torturers would have forced him to say that, which is the first recall.
Yeah. He's got nothing to lose.
Yeah, he's got nothing to lose, and he is boasting. Yeah. He's saying, yeah, I did the right thing. What's wrong with you people? And then you have his deputy testifying to the same thing. And you're like, the guy who did it and his deputy, you know, it's too much for me. I told them that my father was at the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. And So he saw them making the film A Painful Reminder.
Yeah.
And when the director of that said, I did panning shots to show the extent of the carnage. And I pointed them to this video, you know, the Painful Reminder. Most of it is up on YouTube. I'm sure if you search around, you probably find the whole thing. And there's a scene where citizens of the local German village are seen burying the cadavers of the inmates, the Jews, Gypsies, communists, Poles, Russians, whatever, who had been murdered. And it had been said to me, well, you see, what happened was these people starved to death because the Allies cut the food. Then you go, well, while they were starving to death, the villagers here are still fit enough to get up and fill wheelbarrows and hoist these poor desiccated corpses into holes that they've dug. The villagers still well fed enough to dig holes, you know, and you could see them. It was like so. But, you know, down into the nitty gritty of Mr. Death and his ridiculous report, cyanide from the inside of the walls of the gas chamber. And you go, well, this was the walls after the Russians had rebuilt it as a kind of Disney Auschwitz, isn't it? Because they raised them all, didn't they? All the Russian camps were flattened. So the bricks that he tested, who knows where they were? And cyanide, does Zyklon B cyanide? I'm told it doesn't hang around all that long. I clumped together all of that stuff. I never got a reply. You know, I spent 3 days actually piecing it, really not wanting to look at it ever again.
Yeah.
But finding testimony from Nuremberg particularly. And sort of going, you know, how many, do you know offhand how many witnesses there are? How many sworn testimonials the Shoah Foundation?
There are absolutely countless examples, you know, thousands upon thousands of testimonies, because when you kill that many people, a lot of people are going to survive. The Nazis weren't as thorough as they wanted to be. They calculated 11 million Jews in Europe, including the United Kingdom. And they would have to be liquidated. This was the figure at the Wannsee Conference.
1942?
Yeah. Which is, oddly, just after the start of the Holocaust. The Wannsee Conference is slightly later than the first gassing of Jews, which was at Chelmno in December the 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, funnily enough.
Pearl Harbor and...
Same date. But that was the same date that the first gassing of Jews occurred. But the amount of people that survived, let's say that 6.5 million were killed, most of those were Jews. That means that therefore they missed 5 million. And those 5 million, a significant number of those are going to have stories about how they managed to cross a border somewhere, or they managed to hide in a basement, or however it was that they managed to survive. And there are going to be thousands upon thousands of testimonies from people who had survived. In addition to that, the way history works is often misunderstood by deniers. You say, give me one piece of evidence that proves the Holocaust took place.
Hitler ordered the Holocaust. That's one of the big ones, isn't it? Where did the mafia boss write down the orders to the henchmen to make people sleep with the fishers? Yeah.
But history is a sort of a jigsaw rather than something that you can just prove with one frame. History is like a crime scene. So you've got lots of circumstantial evidence as well as direct testimony, direct confessional. You've got evidence in the form of the camps that still exist. The camps that were bulldozed, they still have traces that you can you can tell that Sobibor existed. You can tell that Treblinka was there, not just by the memorial, but by the shape that it left in the ground.
Yeah, you don't have to dig very far to realise that there are an awful lot of dead people there.
Well, yeah, some of the sites used to get raided by gravesite people who were looking for jewelry or things to sell.
Yeah, despicable. And seeing the evidence as it fits together, as it pieces together, because I did find myself fairly deeply researching a contentious human being through a period of history, and to do that I found I had to, I read about Huey Long, the dictator of Louisiana, about whose brother, who then became dictator. There's a wonderful film called Blaze with Paul Newman in playing him, but that's a completely different topic. But I read about Charlie Coughlin and the Church of the Little Flowers, the idea of this guy who was broadcasting pro-Hitler messages, and it was said you could walk from one end of New York to the other, the whole city, on any Sunday while he was talking, and hear every word he said, because everywhere you went, he was the most listened to personality in the world at that time. So I have read, he had such an immense, and he's a Catholic priest who's saying Hitler, now there's a good idea, and eventually the Pope stops him from saying this, and the Pope's like under the control of a fascist leader too, but he's not having people going around saying this. And he's getting the context of the time that Hubbard grew up in and what happened. The amount of information you gather to do that in resolving a history of any kind is remarkable, and the minute details that you find yourself in. I'll give you an example. Hubbard claimed at the age of 12 in 1923 he had been taught by Commander Snake Thompson. As far as we know from what's been public, the Hubbard archive does not contain a document that Russell Miller found. They've got nothing other than a postcard that connects the two. Miller found the ship's company for a passage through the Panama Canal in 1923. And sure enough, L. Ron Hubbard and Commander Snake Thompson, as he was indeed known, are on the same vessel. And you get a little piece of history, and it fits in. I mean, often what fits in with Hubbard, it's listening to him tell the stories and change them every time he tells them, which kind of lets some things go on in his head. This auditing process may not have been too good for him because he actually can't remember events. But what you hear gradually is a framework into which the evidence fits. And doing that with one individual and with maybe hundreds of thousands of documents, but certainly not millions, you then look at what historians are doing in seeking to construct the picture of the events of the Third Reich, and just how much, especially after the Russian archives came open in 1991, and suddenly all of these Gestapo files, they've kept them. They destroyed the camps and raped most of the women, but they kept the files, and suddenly Western historians, European historians, American historians are allowed into this material and find more and more confirmation. The trail is all the way there. The only connection is the idea of whether Hitler ordered it. And you have rationing. Hitler speaks in 1938, fleeing from Danzig, where he was the president of the Senate, Nazi president of the Senate, because he had realized from conversations with Hitler he publishes the book in 1938, he'd realized that Hitler was going to kill the Jews.
Yeah.
And that was Hitler's intention. And he tells the world this before, it becomes embroiled in the sense.
It makes it very clear that the Jews are going to face Vernichtung, which is annihilation. Yes. If the Jews succeed in plunging us into another world war, then the result will not be a victory for Bolshevik Judaism, but their annihilation,
Yeah.
which I think is January the 30th, 1939. Hitler's speech to the Reichstag makes it very clear.
Yeah. And again, he
And well before 1939, in Mein Kampf, he makes it clear what he wants to do to Jews.
yeah, back in the 20s.
It's like when we've just had this nightmare Trump presidency, and he said he was going to do things, and he went and did them. And he said he was going to launch this movement against democracy.
He did.
And he went and did it. You know, when dictators tell you they're going to do things, you should be listening.
Absolutely.
They mean what they say.
Yeah. And coming back however many years later and saying he didn't really mean that. That was just code for be nice to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's this way of developing certainty that we have. I'm sure of this. And being able to say to ourselves, even if, privately, and in a locked cupboard, that am I actually sure of that? What do I mean by sure? Do I mean it feels right to me? Do I mean it consumes
I mean,
me?
how well researched do you think the average Holocaust denier will actually be?
Well, they may have read thousands of pages
Yes.
of David Irving books,
Doesn't really.
the echo
Yeah,
chamber.
yeah.
But but it's people like Fred Leuchter. They'll have read that. I sent them. Who's the what's his name? The great Errol Morris made a documentary. It was Errol Morris, wasn't it? Where he just completely destroys the Leuchter report.
Yeah.
In 20 minutes, it's all shreds. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just an amateur electric chair designer. That's what he spends his time doing. He's not qualified to do it. None of his designs was ever used by anybody, well, as far as we know. But his passion was building death machines.
Yeah. Making gallows and stuff.
Yeah. And
Odd man. Very odd bloke.
Yes. And not trained as a chemist, not trained to do the work he supposedly did, and not credible. But this thought that one can override reality, certainty can be so powerful that you're not reinterpreting reality, or maybe that is it, but it's just being pushed aside. And so with Trump, that he so obviously didn't know what he was talking about much of the time. What are the oranges? What are the oranges of this? You're going, what is it? Oh, origins, I see.
Yeah.
He's having a bit of a problem here. The idea of this beautiful clean coal, when I first heard that, I'm still trying to go, has he actually ever handled a piece of coal? Because I haven't found a clean piece of coal. Not yet.
And I am the chosen one. That's
I am
what a
the
neurotypical person will often say that. Yeah.
And there he is. He's been made president, and on camera, there he is talking to himself, apparently going, I am the chosen one.
Yeah.
Ah,
Every day, a new thing, a new absurdity from this mountain of Satsuma.
Yeah.
And it was just so wearing. You've got every day a worse interface with the world from this fantasist.
And you start him with whatever evidence. I mean, one of his supporters, before Trump was elected, was talking about crooked Hillary, and said that he could prove that she'd committed 14 murders, that she'd been a participant in 14 murders. He could prove it if I wanted him to. I didn't want him to, I must say, because I'm not the American justice system and I don't have that much time to consider the guilt of American politicians. But after the election, within 2 days of him becoming president, Trump gave an interview, and I saw it was broadcast, and in it, he's asked if he will appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton, which is what he said throughout the campaign he will do.
Yeah.
And his reply, and I will never forget these words, was, "The Clintons are good people." That was it.
Yeah.
So this proved this. He knew, it would seem, of somebody who'd committed 14 murders and decided that he wouldn't bother to investigate this person because she was a good person in his estimation. What would his estimation of a bad person be? You know, would that be somebody who hadn't committed any murders, for
A
example?
Mexican.
Yeah, so a Mexican Muslim, that'd be as bad as you could get.
That'd be as bad as you could get.
Anything that begins with Montenegrins, I don't like them. Anything beginning with them.
About Ghislaine Maxwell, he said, "I wish her well." You know, she's indicted on child trafficking.
Multiple charges of
I wish her well.
permitting Epstein to rape children. Yeah, just unbelievable. I wish her well. Well, yes. Well, I wish Donald Trump well. I hope that the chocolate cake in Mar-a-Lago is the best in the world.
He's going to be there in his bathrobe screaming at traffic because he can't get on Twitter and he can't get on Facebook.
Yeah,
he's just going to be pointing and screaming at things.
Sad decline, isn't it?
I remember him saying that he did really like Mexicans. Actually, the ones that served him his cheesecake at Mar-a-Lago were really good people.
Yeah, I don't mean the illegals that work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the contradiction of the George W. Bush administration, that somebody did an article about his home, his ranch, where he spends his time. This was while he was president, and said that it was the most eco-friendly, energy-saving place imaginable. You know, and yet here was a president who didn't seem to care about doing anything other than what Dick Cheney told him, which is proved to be a pretty bad idea for the world. My God.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really has come up. I was just talking with Steve Hassan. He said that suddenly the media are interested in him. You know, Cult of Trump came out however long ago, and now they want to talk to him because it was a cult. And he kind of going, and it proves what a cult the media is, doesn't it? Really does. The idea that they were led by the nose into this idea that they'd better not step out of line with Trump. You know, so even being fake news, by setting them up as people who are making things up, it made them unable to actually talk about the extreme case, the extreme situation we were in, where somebody was not mentally competent president.
But they were getting a lot more views from the mentally incompetent president anyway.
He was fantastic. As soon as the campaign began and he started being on TV, I started watching the news to see what Trump was doing. And quite often there were 2 things a day. And I started watching every documentary I could get because his personality fascinated me. The downtrodden young man who was sent to boot camp at the age of 14 or something. The same kind of treatment that turned his brother into an alcoholic and led him to an early grave. And he's unfrozen, changed, refrozen. And then you find out that he's going to Norman Vincent Peale's church on a Sunday.
Yeah.
The power of positive thinking, the initiator of the post-war positive thinking movement, the secret, the law of attraction, all of these various ideas that all you have to do is pray or wish. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Your dreams will come true. The Disney world that is fundamental to the psyche of so many hundreds of millions of people who believe that wishing and hoping and dreaming and praying will get them a Mercedes-Benz or whatever it is the Lord should buy them. Worshipping their Gohonzon as the Nichiren Shosu Soka Gakkai, whichever mob they are, believe. It's Tina Turner, wasn't it, who had a scroll, or got hands on, and you pray to it. You say, I would like... do what everybody else does. Go to the catalogue, go online, order it online and pay on the tick,
Yeah.
Pay by installments. It's where are we going?
4 flexi payments of $99.99.
That's it. Yeah.
You should watch Ideal World on ITV late at night. It's great, especially when Peter Simon's presenting.
Yeah. What do they do?
Fabulous.
What do they do?
He used to present children's Saturday morning TV.
Well qualified then.
So he's over enthusiastic about everything. Everything that he presents, he's got. He's bought it and he uses it all the time. And he's great. He's just so enthusiastic about it. I've bought loads of stuff.
I didn't even know what a chip blandisher was until I bought it.
Yeah. I had no clue. But no, I watch him laugh. The funniest thing was Peter Simon selling Thomas Kincaid.
Thomas Kincaid.
Selling, Thomas Kincaid artworks.
Which are
the most garish things you've ever seen. There are council flats and trailer parks full of Thomas Kincaid all over the world.
It's like,
he used to show up at the Thomas Kincaid Art Gallery in the local mall. He used to do tours where he'd show up in each town's Thomas Kincaid gallery and he'd paint highlights on a painting for you. So he'd get a print and then he'd paint a couple of highlights and then it'd be a customized Thomas Kincaid.
Whoa, we could do that.
You could.
Let's do that. That'd be brilliant.
And they look like chocolate box Christmas cards. They're frightening. Frighteningly conservative.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, Peter Simon selling Thomas Kincaid was a TV glory.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
We need somebody like that to sell our work.
We're going to get somebody like that to sell our work. Eddie's going to do it.
Yeah. Come on then.
Yeah.
So
I'll be really non-committal and sort of offish about everything. I'll be a terrible salesman.
That's why you ought to do it, I think, though. The challenge.
But if you want, if you don't. That's my sales pitch.
Well, I thought that was pretty good. We could sharpen up the edges of it a bit, I think, There's the world will end if you don't buy this pitch.
Yeah.
Which is used by the Jehovah's Witnesses very successfully and many doomsday groups.
Buy now before the price increase at the end of the month.
Yeah, buy now, scarcity.
Buy now.
Yeah.
Before the price goes up.
5.4 times.
5.4 times. You've got to care enough about the individual to want to push him through the stops and barriers so that he will buy the service.
Not having any
rehabilitate him.
Yeah. Get them to borrow by making fake applications. I think I told you about the East Grinstead bank manager I talked to many years ago. And I was saying, we just got talking about it. And I don't know why he thought he could break protocol so readily. But he said, we see them. They come in, they say they want to buy a new car or do the house up or, whatever story. And then they write a check for the money to St. Hill Foundation or, advanced organization St. Hill or whatever. And they think we're not going to see the checks when they come back. He said, every folder we red tag it. We mark the folders and we won't lend those people money again because they've lied to us, But Scientology is the most ethical organization in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
People being pursued. But I mean, I think we, let's go there. I think we had a mild version of the Nazi experience.
Yeah.
And it was mild enough, certainly for me, I think for you from our conversations, not for all people. Some people were so badly abused that we can't expect them to, incorporate and digest the material and make something of it. But for me, I had two questions when I was about 15 or something. One was, how could the German people all have got together and believed this enough for it to happen? Because they did believe it enough for it to happen. And you find out there was very little resistance. Groups like, say, the White Rose were trivial in comparison to the resistance they met, say, in Denmark or in France. But I wanted to know how people could come to do that. The other thing I wanted to know is how anybody could do what Jack the Ripper had done. So it's the two ends of the spectrum. And I think being in Scientology got me a lot closer to the answer to both of those questions. Looking at what a sadistic narcissist might end up doing to get their jollies. Disemboweling women, of course, is the major practice that Jack the Ripper is known for, over the left shoulder as well, apparently. So that's a tip for anybody out there who wants to copycat the 1888 Whitechapel murders. But they probably won't attribute it to the same killer, I'm afraid, so it won't work. But why, how could anybody do something that horrible to another human being and be getting something out of that? That was the thing. It was like, why would that interest somebody? Why would they want to do something like that? I can't understand that mindset. On the other end, how do these groups form? And I certainly felt when I left Scientology that I knew pretty much how the Nazi Party had grown, and from, the folk culture had transformed, and socialism had become national socialism, this interesting idea of destroying the class system within your country, which I think it's not really remembered from, that was Hitler's political view.
There was a revolution in the Reich. Absolutely, there was a revolution. And some people did very well out of it. But some sectors, of course, didn't. And we know who they are, but there was a financial revolution, an economic revolution. People found themselves better off. It was all populism.
Yeah,
it was all building on the successes of the Weimar Republic.
Yeah, which had somehow managed to hold it all together. And create a relatively civilized country, but with the next layer of economic collapse, when they couldn't repay interest on reparations because the Americans couldn't after the Wall Street crash, lend them to money to keep the interest ticking over. So they an absolutely lost economy. And a guy who's coming up and saying, so for example, the school system that you probably, I only have the slightest idea of this. Do you know anything about the way he kind of squashed the school system so that you wouldn't have these elite schools and the poor schools? The idea was the attempt to make everything the same and then have the nastiest brutes rise to the top. Which is the policy, isn't it? Is that something that you dipped into along the way, what they did with their schools or the Hitler Youth or the whole...
Only in peripheral terms, when reading a book about the Holocaust, sometimes you'll come across a certain policy, such as the Michelin policy. After a certain date, certain people weren't allowed to attend school anymore. Jews all got thrown out of education. Gradually they became disenfranchised, and then there became a cut-off point at which point they were supposed to be educated at home. And there were magnificent efforts to educate kids in the ghettos across Europe. Wonderful cultural programs all sprung up, and each one was resistance, which is really important. You've got this weird idea that they went like lambs to the slaughter, which was a phrase popularized by Hannah Arendt. And of course they didn't go like lambs to the slaughter. They rose up in thousands of ways, including education, making sure the kids got taught things, even in the bleakest days when you thought they're going to send us to Treblinka, once you'd finally realised what was going on. In the final days of the Warsaw Ghetto, for example, you finally realised that they're going to send us to Treblinka. You're still educating the kids.
Yeah.
It's really important. Keep the kids in school, no matter if it looks like all is lost, that you've got to keep them in school.
Mm.
Exactly what Gavin Williams said. Gavin Williamson, got to keep everybody in school as long as possible.
It's a good idea. I think we should keep people in school until at least 38.
Yeah.
And they might have grown up by then.
35, not 38.
38, I've thought about it. 32 is the Roman age of adulthood, I'm told. When you adolescence, it's like this term. Like, when does that actually end, adolescence? And biologically, we are told by some that it ends at 23 in the woman and 25 in the man on average. I was told that 40 years ago. But the Romans have got it, I think, 32.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Douglas Adams, maybe it was 42.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, could be.
Well, I don't think anybody's grown up yet until they're 50, and it keeps rising. When I get to sort of 60, it's going to be 55. Nobody knows anything before the age of 55.
No.
Yeah. Does Donald Trump know anything yet?
Yes. He knows he's not the chosen one.
That's progress. It's progress.
I was thinking, I'm hoping Joe Biden will see through Barack Obama's promise to close Guantanamo Bay within the first year of the Obama administration. I'm hoping that Joe Biden will be able to go back in time and do that. But I think he should either try those people or let them go. Sorry. That's the way justice works. Like it or not, habeas corpus is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the European Declaration of Human Rights as well, and an aspect of law going back centuries. In this country, of course, we're told it goes back to Magna Carta, 1215. It was revoked, of course, by Tony Blair. So we no longer have habeas corpus, but still, we should return to it, and they should let those people go. If they haven't found out by trying to drown them 100 times over anything useful, then it's time to let them go home. They will be full of resentment, I'm afraid.
Yes.
And one of the ways that you make terrorists is by torturing people.
It's how Syed Qutb, the beginning of the Brotherhood of Islam in the 60s as a military group.
Yeah.
Syed Qutb is put into, you're at milestones, he's put into a cell, and they let an Alsatian dog in, and they know he's terrified of dogs. And these dogs are trained to scare the living daylights out of people. And he comes out and he begins to foment revolution. Him and there's a guy.
Revolution. He starts talking about how you can, it's now permissible to kill non-Muslims. Collateral damage, that kind of thinking. Yeah. And Qutb is eventually executed for terrorist offences, essentially.
Yeah, but the point where he is pushed into that direction and begins a movement that will spread across North Africa and influence the later groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS tremendously.
Yeah.
Which begins with the abuse of somebody, the thought of Clinton approving extraordinary rendition, basically saying, look, we can't torture them, but there are places they can be tortured, so they can do it, and then we won't be breaking the law. And you're going, I thought he was a lawyer, this guy. He doesn't know. What was it being told the other day? George Washington said, I cannot tell a lie. What would Richard Nixon say? I cannot tell the truth.
Yeah.
And Bill Clinton said, I cannot tell the difference.
Yeah.
And we are about in the right place there. How awful to be thinking about people who had such power and who've displayed it so horribly. Extraordinary rendition. That if anything caused 9/11, that was it.
Yeah.
That you get people annoyed enough, and sooner or later they'll do something about it.
You've got to look at your foreign policy.
Yeah.
You know, there's no point saying they hate our freedoms when you consider your behaviour over the years. In fact, Osama bin Laden wrote a letter to the United States, which is a bit like Paul writing a letter to the Romans or something. You know, you dear all of the Romans. You know,
I think he only meant the 7 Roman converts, though, so I think it was okay for Paul.
It's awfully biblical. Write a letter to the American people. You know, dear America,
Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop what you're doing in Palestine. Otherwise, we're going to give you a slap. Essentially, is what he said. And this is why he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted felons list, because he'd actually said, "Look, I'm going to sort you out, Gov."
Yeah, I mean, he declared war on them in 1993, and then it took a little while, but nobody was watching. The first time they tried to do the World Trade Center, they messed it up, and they go back and do it again. It's like, okay, you know, couldn't have seen that coming. You know, nothing predicted that. But the fanatical mentality, the Nazi, the terrorist, and it's milder forms in other authoritarian groups. I don't know if you saw Michael Palin. He made a documentary about North Korea.
Yes.
Did you see it? Did you catch it?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I thought it was splendid because everybody starts talking to him. You know?
Yeah, because he's so personable.
Yeah, and he really does seem to take things very well. But seeing the translators and their religious devotion to the Kim family, you know, that sense of, and you kind of go, well, okay, let's sit with some Americans and tell them what we really think about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and their policy towards equality, which didn't extend to women or slaves. But they were creatures of their time. You know, it's like, they were rich creatures with slaves who grew cannabis, which, you know.
Some people were actually not racist, because most of the people at the time, during the abolitionist era of American history, abolitionist groups were generally racist. Just not as racist as the Confederate mentality. But sometimes you'd find someone like John Brown.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who would say, actually, that's racist to the non-racists because they were being racist.
Yes.
There's this continuum. At least I'm not as racist as him. I'm the least racist.
I was very surprised to find that in the 1880s in the US, not only, you know, I was aware of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which I think is 1885.
Yeah.
The first time a particular nationality they can't come to America anymore. That we've got enough of you because you've built the railway now and we don't need you, so go home. But that led to various socialist groups in the US joining societies of Sinophobes, people frightened of the Chinese, and that funding then went from trade union, you know, payments into getting rid of the Chinese, some of whom were indeed up in Washington State rounded up, and those that didn't die in the process were sort of shipped down to San Francisco to be sent back to China. There was this wave of xenophobia, of anti-Chinese action. So you had a group devoted to an idea, and they decide that their idea is bringing good to the world. It's making the world a better place. Make Germany great again. And that belief will allow people to Oh, to believe when you believe absurdities, you can commit atrocities. That's the famous thing that someone famous. It so, and there it is that the sanest, calmest, most loving, most rational people can commit atrocities, which was Hannah Arendt's banality of evil. But thankfully, it isn't true that everyone will commit atrocities. You know, there are points, and there's some recognition of ourselves that's necessary to say, you know, there but for the grace of stupidity, go I. Sorry.
Yeah.
There but for having taken the wrong turning in terms of a belief, go I.
Yeah.
And trying to somehow get people to see that it's the nastiness that's bad. You know, it's not how many pitchforks were used. You know, it's the fact that pitchforks were used that is the problem.
Yeah.
And people want to classify and codify and categorize and push things aside. But, well, I think we've covered a little bit of ground, and we might break until the next time we record something, and going back into the shadows whence we came, and so we can switch off our little recordy things and say, I've been John Atack.
Yeah, I've been Sam Atack.
And this is Ed, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So thanks very much, Ed.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.
Where are we going?